closed in the switch and the high voltage cable blew up. It literally exploded. Well, you can tell from this hole right through the side. And then the whole cable and the pole caught fire. It literally rained fire for a full, felt like an eternity. It was probably 3 or 4 seconds. Friday last week, 7 a.m., I get a no power call. Dispatcher called. I was just getting out of bed. No power to the high school. They were trying to figure out whether or not they should cancel school or not. I told them wouldn't be long figuring that out. So I arrived on site fairly quickly, and we saw a cutout open on the 3-phase set of switches. So really basic setup for underground feed. There was 3-phase pole. We had underground 12.47 kV coming down through a set of cutouts into the primary cables, down the pole, and directly into the school. There was no pad mount transformer outside. The school has their own switch gear internally. So I did a few quick checks. We checked the electrician was on site. There was no damage inside on the terminations. Same thing with the outside. It was in the woods. There was a lot of debris in the ground. Couldn't see if there was a squirrel or something that got into the live lines. So we said we'll close it in. And actually, what's interesting, I've got it on the floor here somewhere. So this is the actual fuse that blew. It's a 140 amp fuse. What you don't typically see is this. Usually that's encased in a piece of cardboard like this. So when you're fusing a cutout, you see a fuse that looks like that. This is not the weak point. This is not the actual fuse. The fuse inside that cardboard is this tiny little guy here. Well, this one's a little bit rugged where it's 140 amp. So that screws in to the cap, and when I took the cutout door out, you could see there wasn't catastrophic failure. You can even see that tiny little bit of the fuse link still kind of intact there, but it ultimately just melted off and let go. Figured there could have been an arcing tap clamp. As that tap clamp arcs and the voltage goes down, due to the type of equipment inside the school, there could be increased current flow. That wouldn't cause a fuse to blow immediately, but after months and months of that, it can certainly melt a fuse off. So could have been a loading issue, could have been a squirrel, could have been a bird. Pretty much didn't find anything. Refused, closed, happens all the time. Told the electrician, I said, we'll know here in about 2 seconds if we got to close the school or not. I said, probably 95% chance we're going to close that switch in. We'll go inside, check voltage, and we should be good to go. I said, if you hear a loud bang and hear me yell curse words, close the school. So I closed it in, and I always try to teach guys when they're using an extendo stick, don't stand directly below the switch for 2 reasons. As the sections go down inside each other, there's a little bit of play. So when you have 6, 7 sections, whatever, you're directly underneath, that wiggly stick gets really wiggly. So if you step back from the pole 10 feet or so and let it lean down, and you have more control, plus you're not directly under the switch. And thankfully I wasn't, because when I closed that switch in, it wasn't just a bang. You see videos of cutouts blowing all the time. I wish I had set up my camera and caught that, because it was wild. I've seen a lot of cutouts blow, and this one was pretty dramatic. But as soon as I closed it in, you heard noises, pops, bangs. You could tell the recloser was operating. It didn't lock right out immediately. And then I had my head down. You've seen videos, I always look down at the ground, so I didn't see the flash up top. But there was just literally rain of fire coming down. Wasn't directly on me, it was all in front. And you can see where this is the high voltage. That would be 7200 volts. It goes down in through the termination, and you can actually see the 2-aught copper cable inside there. You can see the track mark where it went right down all the way through that. Get my hands all dirty here. Even on the base, it burned a hole right through there. That's what it's supposed to look like. So there was a little bleeder here that burned off. That was going to the ground. This was attached to the L bracket, and it burnt a hole right through that, as well as the L bracket. It was insane. And then this whole thing was on fire. The other cables were on fire. had to dump the line to get the fire out. It was bad scene. But let's go in the house and cut this guy open, see what it looks like inside, see if we can kind of figure out how this thing went to ground, where the fault was. Okay, I'm gonna get this out of the way first because I know people are gonna say it looks like I'm wearing eyeshadow. Still doing basement renovations. You can see, put in a black soundproof ceiling, and one thing I didn't like was the duct works. So I had this crazy idea. It's gonna be black soundproof ceiling in here as well, but I blacked out the ductwork. Did that today. Had to build a whole room with plastic and wear a respirator and all that stuff, and yeah, it gave me eyeshadow eyes. So we're just gonna hang out in this small room that I built last year, and let's have a look at things. So these are the two terminations here. Hold that thought, gonna put some gloves on. Alright, huge mess going on in here right now. First thing I want to mention for the viewers that are linemen, when you're doing terminations, I'll switch to a different lingo for the non-lineman viewers, but when you're doing terminations, one of the most important things is not allowing water to get in the termination. If water bleeds down inside that cable, the freeze, thaw, it's going to wreak havoc on that. I'm not sure if that's what happened in this case or not. Very possible. Water could have down those, crimped there. This guy, he's actually cracked. So that's why I kind of wanted to cut that guy open. But now that we're inside, let's take a closer look at it. So it looks like the failure point, I don't believe, it looked like it tracked through the epoxylator. It looks like it came out and around the surface here. I was going to say it went internal, but it broke right through this particular guy here. It went down through the inside, and ultimately that's where the highest current was there as it blew out. There's a real solid reference to ground here that didn't really do much. That bleeder cable is just that there's no stray static voltage building up on the insulator. You see them on all forms of terminations. But this bracket was tied directly to ground. There was a ground on the pole, so that's why it was such catastrophic failure right there. That guy looks like it might pull right off. Before we get into cutting that, for the non-lineman viewers, when you have underground power lines, they're either going to come out of the substation, almost go directly underground from the power transformer. Most cases there is a point where they go overhead, even at the substations. They come out of the ground and attach to the buswork. But what's really important, as we all know, you can't touch power lines. We've all seen videos of tree branches touching power lines and the incredible arc flash they make. Very dangerous stuff. So how do you take such high voltage and literally run down a pole beside a sidewalk that people can touch the cable? There is oftentimes cable guard on it or piping, but essentially that cable is at ground level. So we do what's called a termination, and the cable itself, let's just take a look at this guy. This is I believe it's a 1000 MCM copper cable. We will do a video on how to do a proper termination eventually. When you cut the cable off, there's multiple layers to the cable. In the center of the cable, we've got our high voltage. In this case, it's very large wire. Looks like 1000 MCM, maybe 750. Probably says on the cable somewheres. You have your layer of insulation. This is ultimately what's keeping the voltage from escaping, for lack of better words. Then we have semicon, and then we've got our ground. Some cables have a concentric neutral, some have a jacket shielding. This can be tapped off of and used as a neutral, or in this case where this was a feeder cable, that's just grounded on one end, just for shielding, but there was a separate neutral run. So what's interesting, when you see insulators on power lines, you typically see something like this. There's quite a large distance of insulation. So how is it that going from here to the copper, which is just on the outside of that, there's sufficient insulation. And the value of the insulation, I'm not sure what the value of that would be. This cable would have been energized at 7,200 volts. The 7,200 volts, there's not a high enough voltage to break down the value of that insulation. That's the same with our insulators, except for this guy. So technically speaking, and definitely don't ever do this, but there's 7,200 volts in there. There's enough insulation value right here for it not to go through that to my finger. But these being out in open air, and this is a great example, over time they get really bad UV damage. You get salt spray, could be from natural salt spray being close to a body of water, could be from the roads. You also get mineral deposits in the rain. Basically, the inside of that cable, it's 100% clean all the time. The insulation value maintains its value, whereas the outer layer of insulation, it breaks down, it gets mineral deposits as the rainwater evaporates off. It becomes kind of conductive. The greater the surface area, the more of a distance. So as that electricity, where it's not going to come from the inside out because that insulation's in such good shape, it wants to travel on the outside. This is 7,200 volts right here. This is stalled metal, so that's 7,200 volts. And it's got a very large distance to go. If that wasn't ribbed like that, you'd measure that and say maybe 6 inches. But if you were to actually take a string and drag it along there, you would probably have 12 or 18 inches distance. So it's a much greater distance for that voltage to travel. It also helps when it does rain, the rain kind of cleans off the insulator, but sometimes it makes it worse, leaves mineral deposits, as I said. And then the underneath is generally untouched by dirt and debris and stuff. So you'll see on some insulators, the tops and bottoms, just a slightly different texture. Likely what failed in this cable, when you look at the condition, this here, when it gets all cracked, same as a crack in a porcelain insulator, the electricity at that point can, if the cracks are deep enough or if it's completely severed down to the inside, which that pretty much, yeah, that's completely separated. This was a good one. This guy was energized. It can break down enough point where it's constantly trying to establish a path, and then it just snowballs from there. So I'm just going to get my Sawzall out and we're going to cut that guy open. Just while I'm doing that, another thing I want to mention, when I close that cable in, the fuse blew. So our standards allow for us to close in on, I might as well kneel down, put my face in the cam. Our standards allow for energizing an underground cable, even after a fuse blows, without doing any testing, as long as it's fused. Problem was, once I closed that in, and the recloser was going like on and off, sparks kept bang flying, and when it all stopped and I looked up, everything was on fire. Even the center cable caught fire. That center cable, I couldn't open that. It wasn't on a load break cutout. There was 4 riser cables on that pole. Very difficult to climb, but you're not going to climb a pole that's on fire anyways. So I ended up, that's why I had to dump the line. But this is what we put back up, load break. So the cutouts that were initially there did not have this load break capability. If they had I would have been able to open all 3 from the ground. The only way I could have opened them once it was on fire would have been to climb and put a load buster on it, which definitely not going to do. I do have a video on load buster. Check out, I think just Google Bobsdecline load buster. You'll figure it out. So we replace them with that. So in the future, if we have to open those cutouts, even just for regular maintenance, I don't know why those weren't there, but they now have load break cutouts. Thank goodness. So I think what we'll do at that first point, let's cut through that right there. This is probably going to rattle and make my phone fall to the floor. Right, worked out pretty easy. Interesting. So you can see the insulation still fully intact around the copper right there. The arc was traveling on the outside, so the fault started a little bit higher up in the cable. Same with this guy here, it's still intact. I can see some damage on this top side, so let's see if we can, that might pull right off. There we go. So this is the stinger that crimps onto the cable. Interestingly enough, there's no damage to the insulation there either. So I would say, by the looks of things, the insulation on the cable itself didn't fail at any point. So it doesn't look like a situation where it was water damage. Maybe there could have been water in the cone itself. But that lined up, you can see the mark here where that was covering. And the failure point was right at the bottom. So that there being energized at 7,200 volts. It looked like there was just a complete breakdown of the insulator. And it must have been tracking through that, slowly burning and establishing a path to ground. So the cable itself never really failed. It was literally the degradation of the termination. So all we did in order to fix that, you can see we cut it off flush there. The difference between this cable and the one I just showed you guys is the neutral was already stripped back, and we use that actually as a neutral going to the school. But we simply cut that off, and then we peeled the jacket back another 11 inches, had the neutral coming out, and then redid the termination process, which looks like that pretty much. So we had that peeled back. There was a lot more insulation exposed than that. We crimped on the lug, put up brand new terminations. I do gotta say huge thanks to the town guys who helped out build a road to access the pole. It was in the woods, and to try to do that off hooks would have been a nightmare. It was a difficult pole to climb to begin with, but we did a full rebuild, cutouts, lightning arresters, terminated all 3 cables. So we built a road, got one of our bucket trucks in there. My partner went up in the bucket truck. I climbed the pole and redid the 3. He was above me up near the live 3 phase out of the bucket working on that. And I just stood on the telephone wire down below and did the terminations for the 3 cables. So it's a long day, worked out good. Probably gonna chuck this guy in the dumpster before I get soot all over the house. Just thought you guys would find that pretty interesting. Lots of great stuff coming up. I'm gonna carry on finishing my ceiling in the basement. But thanks for stopping in, guys, and we'll see y'all soon.